But ladies and gentlemen, I think it's only fitting to maybe be upstanding for the only man to score a hat-trick in a World Cup final, the one, the only, Sir Geoff Hurst.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks. Thank God you remembered. I just want to say something about Bobby Robson. It's very appropriate he had his night of nights here, and pay a tiny tribute to him to start with, because an interesting story how my wife met him first. Bobby went to the World Cup in 1970 when we nearly won it. Had a great team then. And Bobby, a young manager, was naturally watching all the big tournaments and learning his trade. And in the World Cup in 70, we took 4 wives, or wags as they're called nowadays. And she was in the same hotel as Bobby, the 4 wives, and my wife was one of the 4. And after the World Cup, she came back when we were talking about it. She said, there was a very nice man, she said. She said, my missus didn't know much about football then. She said, I think he was involved in football or something. She said, but what an absolutely fantastic man he was. And it's always stuck in my mind about Sir Bobby. And because we've seen recently, not only was he loved in this part of the world, but everybody who met him, what a great guy he was. And I was very privileged to work with him with him under Ron Greenwood's reign as a manager between 77 and 82, when Bobby was appointed the B team manager of England, and then subsequently taken over from Ron Greenwood not too far after that. So just want to mention, it was great to see the montage there, and a great man and sorely missed, and a wonderful, wonderful football man, and you must be very proud of him in this particular part of the world. So fantastic. About 7 or 8 years ago, I was in a London hotel, staying overnight on business, I think. And the following day, I was flying out from Heathrow on a business appointment. I didn't have my car with me in London. Decided not to get the underground out to Heathrow, but got in the back of a London black taxi cab on about a 30-minute drive to Heathrow. And I got in the back of the cab and had a large broadsheet newspaper, and I was engrossed in that for 4 or 5 minutes. And then you have this feeling you're being stared at. We all have this innate feeling as human beings that somebody's looking at you, don't we? And I felt a bit uncomfortable. I lowered the newspaper and I looked at the rearview mirror and the cabbie's eyes just staring at me. He didn't have it on the window itself. I was sat diagonally across, straight on me, pair of eyes. And I forgot about it. I went back to the newspaper, engrossed for a bit of peace and quiet and anonymity in the back of the cab. But I felt a bit uncomfortable again. Sure enough, lowered the newspaper, just the eyes. This went on all the way to Heathrow. We're now in the tunnel at Heathrow. And the cabbie looked over his shoulder. Oi, mate, oi. Give us a clue, give us a clue. I said, my name's Sir Geoff Hurst, MBE. I played 500 games for West Ham United, scoring 250 goals. I had the great honour of representing my country on 49 occasions, scoring 24 goals. And I'm still the only man on the planet to score a hat-trick in the World Cup final. And the cabbie looked over his shoulder. Don't be a prat, mate. Which terminal do you want? It's just a story that tends to bring you back down to earth. As I said, people know we have got a West Ham fan here tonight somewhere. Goodness me, up here. Fantastic. I'm surprised not many West Ham fans are owning up to anything at the moment. But funny enough, I was at the training ground at Chapel Heath near Romford at the start of the season, pre-season time, and I had a chance to talk to Gianfranco, and I said, what about football at Upton Park this year? Gianfranco, and he said, Geoff, he said, that's a bloody good idea. And I said, what are the prospects? He said, well, I can guarantee we'll be in the Premiership for the next 4 seasons. I think what he meant was it was going to be spring, summer, autumn and frigging winter. And the way it's looking at the moment, boys, is that we'll be swapping places with the Magpies at the end of the season. Certainly you'll be up, and we've got half a chance of maybe staying up, but it doesn't look 5 on the trot we've been beaten, so it doesn't look good. Not at all, not at all. It is quite remarkable. I've got interesting tonight, just popped across the table over there, and most of that table were at the final, which is normally you get one or two guys to turn up during the night and say the memories of the day. And what's terrific this evening is that mostly that table is we're at the final, so they'll enjoy tonight because there's a long one to bloody well talk about. But the amazing thing is, I didn't talk to them about their particular memories of it, but you realise how big it is when the national team are successful in cricket, football. Or you don't really realise till many years later when people still talk about our time in remembering just where they were and what they were doing on the day. It's one of the great days of that generation. And I got strange enough, about 15, 16, 17 years ago, good story about that. I was involved in management for a little while, played and managed Telford and Chelsea for a couple of years. And then I was summarily dismissed from Chelsea Football Club in 1981. April 23rd and 12 o'clock. And then decided, because money wasn't quite as good, although better than the national average, it still wasn't good enough. I found very quickly I could earn as good a living outside of the game without having the hassle of moving your wife and kids around, all over the country, as managers do. And so I decided to get out of the game. I got in fact, there's one of my customers here tonight who I sold warranties to. I can see a smile, up here selling car warranties, which I did for nearly 20 years before retiring in 2002. Anyway, I attended a big insurance dinner early on in my business career. And at that time, I hadn't been against much, wanted to engross myself and be successful in business, and was out of the limelight and unrecognisable and all that stuff that goes along with being on TV a lot. And it was a big luncheon in our Friday lunchtime, 700 or 800 people in one of the hotels, again in Park Lane, round tables of 10s and 12s, a bit like the configuration we have tonight. And the guy sitting next to me was an insurance guy, didn't recognise me quite clearly, didn't have a clue who I was. Not a problem. But the conversation, Friday lunchtime, the boys are winding down for the weekend, having a few beers, and then it gets round to sport and to football and to World Cups, and eventually they touched on the '66 World Cup. And the chap sitting next to me didn't have a clue who I was. He said, "It's amazing," he said. He said, "Everybody remembers where they were and what they were doing when that fourth goal went in." And he recounted how at the time, he lived in Kuwait and watched the match, or listened to the match on a crackly old radio, whilst he worked out there, I think, something to do with the oil business. And I always reply in a similar vein when I get this by saying another day of our generation where we remember where we were was the assassination of President John F. Kennedy in Dallas, November '63. In those 2 days, we remember exactly where, and I remember where I was. And this chap looked straight back at me between the eyes. He said, "Tell me," he said, "just what were you doing when the fourth goal went in?" And now, as is normal, one or two people on the table had a bit of an idea, or wasn't it, went a bit quiet, and they all started to glare across at this guy. And his best mate, I can still see him now, put his mate in the shit. He said, "You stupid or what?" He said, "This is the guy that scored all the goals. This fella is now in a serious hole." And as we humans do, try and dig himself out of it. And looked a bit puzzled, but thought for a moment, he said, and came back at me, he said, "Blimey," he said, "you must be the captain, Bobby Moore, then." What a prat, what a prat. So one of many stories. And I mean, I could do half an hour on the story. Just one, I was in Tesco's last week shopping with my missus, the weekly shopping. I don't go often, but I got collared this particular day. And I went in the cafe for a cup of coffee. My wife likes a cup of coffee at 11 o'clock, so we're sitting there, and one of the guys that worked in Tesco, one of the senior execs, came over, who I'd seen in there in the past, but had never spoken to me. He came over. He said, "Great to see you." He said, "You're Geoff Hurst, aren't you?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Can you sign this piece of paper for me? It was a greetings card." I said, "Sure." He said, "Well, these couple, my best friend and his wife, they got married on July the 30th, 1966. He said, "Would you sign it?" I said, "Pleasure." I said, "They still together?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "But I tell you, he's my best mate." And he said, "The wedding, which I attended as best man, it was the disaster." He said, "The women were in one room dancing all day. The men were in a little room looking at a 9-inch black and white telly." He said, "The reception was just a blooming disaster." And it was just a poignant thing that it happens almost every day. It's quite remarkable. You need a bit of luck in football, and I was lucky to start the World Cup. I had only played 5 games and played poorly in the friendly games 2 friendly games in Scandinavia and Poland just before the World Cup started. And so Alf Ramsey, in his wisdom, started off those 2 very average players, Roger Hunt from Liverpool and Jimmy Greaves from Spurs. And I make comparisons with the quality of competition we had then, which we don't quite have enough up front today, but I'll get to that in a minute. And, but sadly for Jimmy, one of the great strikers, and I'll make a comparison with Wayne in a minute with him. Jimmy got injured. He was a great player of our time. Injured in the early round against France. And so somewhat fortuitously, I made my debut against, in the quarter-final in '66 against those kind, lovable, friendly players from Argentina. Now, nothing's changed. We know the Argentine players are fantastic. They do well in our league because they're extremely aggressive and can cope with the physical aspect of the Premier League. And we know some outstanding players, Mascherano, Liverpool, Tevez as well at Man City. And so they cope very well. And most teams have 2 or 3 players that can sort things out. You need them in all the great sides in every level of football. Central defender, central midfield player. All the great teams in any part of the world have those key players that can win the ball for the side. That Argentina side had about 7. They had a left winger, attacking left winger called Oscar Mas, M-A-S. And he was not much bigger than this, and he was a dirty little bastard. But the most notorious that team was their 6'5" captain, the late Antonio Ratin. No, he's not dead. He just tackled that way. He eventually got sent off for quite a nasty tackle on our diminutive midfield player, Alan Ball, 5'4", 5'5". Bally man of the match for me and many of us at the time. And a tackle on Bally, and then subsequently, as you know, if you've seen the film, arguing with the referee and got his marching orders just before half-time. If you speak to Bally, God rest him, about their tackle, he will tell you one of Ratin's fairer challenges. It only caught Bally just below the windpipe. And that's why Bally, sadly, spoke with a very high-pitched voice for the rest of his life. And that was, we talked about Bally tonight, sad loss, the youngest member of the side and the youngest wife, both gone. And really a big shock to all of us 3 odd years ago. But I nicked one of Bally's lines. He used to talk about the game afterwards, and he used to say, for many weeks and years after, he said, Ratin, he said, I have to tell you, Bally would say, Ratin's a very nice man. He is, and when you got to know him, he's a nice man. He said, he'd kick your bollocks off, but afterwards, he would help you look for them. Sorry, Bally, In fact, Bally took very well, as some of you may have seen in different parts of the country. They were quite a successful after-dinner speaker, and on the early days, being small, he stood on the chair and addressed people in the early days of doing it, and took to that particular role very well. He talked about his passion of playing for his country, and one of the most passionate players I've ever seen representing England. And he always introduced himself in these dinners as your after-dinner squeaker, and that was Bally, God rest him. I said I'd make a comparison. It's interesting when you look back, and people don't realise in the context of today. If you just imagine what happened in our time, if you take Wayne Rooney, who's the man of the moment, he's a fantastic young player, and capable of playing any era in any team at any level. He's just a wonderful player, playing absolutely out of his skin, and a fantastic player. He's got 50, I think he's played 55, 56 games and scored 26 goals-ish, which is, 1 in 2 and a fantastic player for the country. And when I talked about Jimmy Greaves earlier, Jimmy Greaves played 57 games for England and scored 44 goals. And if you imagine Wayne Rooney today getting injured in an early round of the World Cup and not playing in the final, it seems unthinkable. And that's what happened with Greavesy, who was the player of our time, being left out for a player that's only played 5 games and only 5 months before the World Cup final. So it's quite a surprising time if you put that in some sort of context. And Jimmy Greaves, just to remind you, his record for all his games, Spurs, Chelsea, and England, and West Ham for a little bit, is 3 goals every 4 games. His record at Chelsea, he got inside at 16 years of age, and he played 169 games for Chelsea and scored 132 league goals for the year before he went to Milan. So he was some sort of player. So I was very fortunate to get in the side with Jimmy being injured. was out with Jack Charlton, one of the big heroes, a great teammate of mine, a great character. Most of you would have seen, watched him or listened to him talk, and a real fantastic character. I love him to death. And I was out with him doing a Q&A about 5 or 6 weeks ago. And he said something interesting about the World Cup coming up. When we did the Q&A, which he hadn't said to me, but he said, on an answer to a question, he said, I think this is the last chance the England team have got for some time, which was a little bit surprising, but he then went on to say, you've got people like Gerrard now, Lampard, Ferdinand, Terry in key positions, and you look at the moment who replaced the quality of those 4 players, not necessarily in this final, but in the next few years coming up, and it was quite an interesting time. And I think we've had opportunities in the previous regime, prior to Capello, and I think in a sense, because that area wasn't particularly well managed, I think we've lost an opportunity with some of the terrific players we've got. And as Jack said, which and I'm inclined to agree with him, it may be our last chance for a bit. But I think the great thing about the current squad and the management, it's really good. There's great comparisons with Capello, with Alf Ramsey in our time. And he's introduced a great deal of discipline into the England setup, and the players are responding. And I think we're as a fan, as we all are, as well prepared for this particular World Cup as we've been for some time. So it looks extremely encouraging. I'm asked a question. I was in the toilet tonight, and a guy asked me a question. Was the ball over the line? It's the most question I get asked over the years, mainly by the Germans, and occasionally by the Scots. They didn't like it, the fact that. Oh, no, we're not far off the board here. There must be a couple of jocks in the audience, aren't they? They're all normally here. Come on, put your hands up, boys. There's 1. Oh, it's 2. Is there any more than 2 on buggering? Oh, it's 3. I'm going to go back down south. I love the Scots. They know their football, and some great times. My record of playing against Scotland, my second cap was against Scotland in the days when they played at the old Hampden Park with 135,000 screaming, jocks, and it was a fantastic atmosphere to play in. And my first international goal was in Scotland in my second game. Up you, jocks, good. But I might just tell, as an aside, just tell you a story. I flew to Aberdeen about this goal business. I flew to Aberdeen on a speaking engagement a long time ago. I don't normally go that far, and I'm not really welcome in Scotland for some reason. But I'd flown to Aberdeen, a smashing venue, was about 500 people in the audience. It was a really great occasion, and fantastic. I can't remember, it was like one of these castles in Scotland, fantastic. And I flew to Aberdeen early in the morning. It was a very nice day. Not working. Is it all right? Oh, okay. Oh. Can you hear me? Am I facing the right way? Oh, good. Thank you. Thought we had a mic problem. Where was I? Anyway, flew to Aberdeen, nice day, early in the morning, got to the airport, went in the terminal. There was a Scot there with his overalls on. He worked out probably on the jets and on the servicing of the aircraft. But the Scots know their faces and football faces, and he saw me coming 50 yards away, got off his chair, and I was 5 or 6 yards away, and he looked up and didn't say good morning, didn't say welcome to Scotland. He just looked up and said, "It was near fucking goal." I must apologise to you lads north of the border about the accent. I'm from south, but and it always amuses me that So I would tell you, look in the book, boys. 4-2. But I mean, it's a great time for the Scots. It's sad that we don't play the home internationals now, which were great fixtures. I mean, there's not enough room in the sporting calendar. The football calendar day with the home internationals, they were great fixtures against Hampden Park one year and Wembley the next. And I certainly missed playing them when they stopped those fixtures. So about the goal, which people have asked me about, was the ball over the line? Now in our team, we had a kind and lovable, friendly midfield player called Norbert Stiles. Many people know, of course, very affectionately as Nobby. And many people's memory and visual memory of the final, the aftermath, which you may have seen there, was Nobby Stiles with his the World Cup in his hand, his socks around his ankles, skipping around the stadium with his 4 front teeth missing, back in his handkerchief, back in his jacket in the dressing room. And many people always talk about that as one of their abiding memories, visual memories of the World Cup. But Nobby was a tough player, but he could also play a bit. Very important role then and today, the holding midfield player that can sort things out. Very important position for most teams. But Nobby set the ball up for the goal. He had a smashing pass to Bawley on the right wing. In his path, didn't have to control it to stop it, let it run down towards the right-hand corner flag. And I played, but I'd only played a few games then, but I played with Bawley in the under-23s, and I'd also go back as far as the under-17s for England with Nobby. So we played a bit together, and having chatted to them over a few years, the Nobby and Bawley knew that at West Ham we liked the near post ball. We developed it under Ron Greenwood. Whip it in like Beckham does today, round the full-back, in between the back four and the keeper, very dangerous to defend, whip it in. And I said either myself or Martin Peters will be in at the near post to knock it in, to flick it in. On this occasion, I made the run into the near post a little early. The ball came here, the goal's still on my left. So I had to take a couple of touches, if you've seen, to get it back on track, hit the ball on the half-turn, fell on my backside, if you look at the film, and really had the worst view in the stadium when the ball came thundering down from the bar. And there was a great deal of confusion, and still is, whether or not the ball had crossed the line. You look at the film today, the evidence still proves inconclusive. The Swiss referee Dienst, he consulted the Russian linesman, Bakhmarov, and neither spoke a common language, so fuck knows what they were talking about. But eventually, Bakhmarov, the Russian linesman, gave the famous nod, and the goal counted, and the Germans, of course, were fuming. But the thing is this, and I've had asked this question, the person that afternoon with the best view in the stadium was my striking partner from Liverpool, the great Roger Hunt, or Sir Roger Hunt, as they call him up in Merseyside. Wonderful goal-scoring record for Liverpool and England, one in two. And Roger, being a fantastic professional, instinctively, following in as he was, if you're not sure the ball is over, your instincts are, as a great striker, is to make sure and put it back in the net. And Roger didn't. Put his arm in the air, wheeled away, shouted, "It's a goal, it's there," or some such words. And really, that's been good enough for me, and he still maintains that 44 years after the event. And Roger Hunt is a very honest Liverpudlian. But the thing is this, the goal thing carries on, because in 2006, as you know, the electrical retailers all over the country, when there's a big sporting occasion, the Rugby World Cup or the Ashes, that's when the retailers start to produce their latest equipment, plasma screens, DVDs, Blu-ray and all the other stuff. And the big selling point of the new product around the 2006 time was the high-definition televisions. Remember that? HD ready. And this all came out, and some wag who wrote in the newspaper said that had they had high-definition televisions in Geoff Hurst's day, it would have quite clearly shown that the ball wasn't over the line. Now, the Sun newspaper got hold of this comment and came back onto me again to ask me yet again for my opinions on the goal. This is around 2006. And when the Sun newspaper asks you for comments, you might as well talk to them, because if you don't, they'll write a load of shit anyway. So I was just jetting off somewhere again, don't know where I was off, so I decided to leave a few paragraphs with one of my colleagues in another newspaper to pass on to the Sun newspaper. But I will be honest with you, in the privacy, as far as the goal's concerned, in the privacy of this lovely room, as far as the goal's concerned, I must be honest, I really couldn't give a shit. It's in, it counts, and the referee gave it, and that's it. Who cares? Before I finish on a couple of stories and the final itself and a Nobby Star, another Nobby Star story, I've got over the years, I've collected a few written comments that various players all over the country have gone into newspapers, or they've said publicly, and I'd just like to mention a couple, which I've managed to put together. This one you may know, it's from one of your sons of the North East. I've had 14 bookings this season, 8 of which were my fault, but 7 of which were disputable. Paul Gascoigne. I'd like to play for an Italian club like Barcelona. Mark Draper. Another one from a North East god. A North East god indefinitely. I've never wanted to leave. I'm here for the rest of my life, and hopefully after that as well. Alan Shearer. Another great from Liverpool. I couldn't settle in Italy. It was like living in a foreign country. Ian Rush. This one for the ladies. The ladies will know who this is before I finish. I definitely want Brooklyn to be christened, but I don't know into what religion yet. David Beckham. One from West Ham, or a West Ham player at some stage. Germany are a very difficult team to play. They had 11 internationals out there. Steve Lomas, West Ham. Finally, just one for the road. My parents have been there for me ever since I was about 7. David Beckham. Just a few World Cup matches. Thanks. Bit of fun. Story about Nobby, and then but what reminded me was the lineup before the game. If you notice the German, when they played the national anthem in latter years, more recently today, you line up on the touchline quite close to the stand. In that game, and around that time, you lined across the centre circle, halfway in the pitch, quite away from the main stand. So it reminded me of a lovely Nobby Stiles story. The night before the game, the players were told who were playing, individually and privately, and told not to speak to anybody or discuss it with anybody. Each individual player told he was playing. And Nobby was told. He phoned his wife in Manchester, Kay, lovely girl from Dublin, who didn't really care about football then and still not today. And he said to Kay, "Darling, I'm playing. It's fantastic." And they were both thrilled about it.
Excuse me, ladies and gents, could we have a bit of hush, please? Thanks very much. Cheers.
We had so Nobby called Kay, and he said, "Kay, he said, when you come to the game tomorrow, please wear something very patriotic in your dress colours that the national team wear." And thought nothing more about it. But then he, fast forward 24 hours, we walk on the pitch, we line up, and then across the pitch, the players, on the pretext of doing some exercises, a little stretching, they pick out their loved ones in the crowd, or their wives, or both. Well, that's pretty topical. And he managed to pick out Kay in the crowd and gave her a sneaky wave. But to his consternation, she was waving back at the German captain, Uwe Seeler, who was very similar build. Nobby had forgot to tell her, of course, that we were wearing our red shirts, not the white. My wife was waving at Franz Beckenbauer, and she knew he was wearing white. But Nobby said to Kay after the game, "When did you realise that we were wearing red, not white?" She said, "Well, at the end of normal time, 90 minutes, when the Germans equalised at 2-2, she said, I was the only person in my section of the stand standing up cheering." Great Nobby Stiles, that. Great. I talked about how big it is. You don't realise at the time you're playing the magnitude of the occasion, but you realise 40-odd years later when people still talk about their memories and what a big occasion it is. And do I remember it? Of course I do. The great Jimmy Greaves was fit to play, but they stuck with this kid that's only played 6 or 7 games for England. So you can imagine that it sticks in my mind as everybody else who watched the game and listened to it all over the world. I'll just finish off by talking about the final moments of the game and one or two things that I always recall in it. We're leading 3-2 with seconds to go through that disputed goal, which by now is at least 2 yards over the line. The referee, Dean's got the whistle in his mouth, waving play on with both arms. We know the game's imminently going to finish. The Germans become aware of that, and they push their centre-half sweeper, Willi Schultz from Hamburg, up front into the forward line. And then just knocked it into our penalty area, as we all, third division football, often as you can, in the dying moments of the game. And what was to be the last cross that afternoon was knocked in by Willi Schultz, who found himself on the right wing. So he's knocked it into the box, and it's going to bounce somewhere around the penalty area. Banksy, the greatest goalkeeper I've seen, wasn't going to catch it or even punch it. Big Jack was at the far post with marking Uwe Seeler, the centre forward. But who'd read the trajectory of the ball, knew exactly where it was going to come, seconds ahead of everybody else, was my captain at West Ham in England for 15 years, one of the real greats of our team. His brilliance of being able to read it and be composed he was born with that as a kid. So what does Moro do in a dangerous situation? Just think about this, seconds to go. He chests it down in the middle of the box. Now, I'd seen him do this since he was 15 at West Ham, grew up with him. I was quite comfortable, I knew he knew what he was doing. Big Jack, his centre-back partner, hadn't really seen this sort of football before and was getting a bit nervous. In fact, he was heard at that stage to call across to Moro, Robert, will you please kick the ball out of the ground? Oh, you know, a word to that effect. Moro completely ignored him. He threatened to knock it wide to George. All right back. The German front two opened up. He waltzed through them to the edge of our box, saw me running away on the halfway line, knocked a fantastic ball from defence to attack, a lovely floaty ball you can deal with. You can chest it down, you can flick it on, you can lay it off, you can even let the ball run without touching it, from that great quality of his service. But as it came to me, Moro was very immaculate as a player as well. He knew the game was finished, preparing himself to meet the Queen, pulling his shorts up here and straightening his shirt. And who does this? Think about this. He gets the trophy off the Queen, sees she's wearing white gloves, and he has the forethought to wipe his hands on the carpet to make sure he doesn't dirty the Queen's gloves in the furore of winning a World Cup. Who does it? Who does this? Unbelievable. So the ball eventually came to me on the halfway line. A couple of strides inside the German half. We've all been in this position, lads, in the centre forward in a big game, any level. Hold on to it. Corner flag. Next thought was, I'm not going to pass to a red shirt. It's not going to break down between me and the next shirt now. We've already lost the 90 minutes 2-2 thing, so we can't afford to blow it now. A couple more strides. Overath was tracking me down, you see from the film, from Cologne. Snellinger left the man he was marking in the left-back position to cover my route to goal. But then I heard a call from one of my teammates on the right side. And it went like this. Hursty, give me the ball. Give me the ball, pass the fucking ball. And that call, as you can imagine, did disturb the German defence. And two things happened. Snellinger and Overath momentarily left me, expecting me to pass over there. And the second thing happened was I said to myself, fuck you, Bally, I'm on a hat-trick. And that little... And that little ginger-headed git never forgave me for the next 40 years for not passing to him. Everybody we spoke, he said he should have passed it to me. God bless him. But that did happen. The call did momentarily pull people away, allowed me to get to the edge of the box, and my thoughts are just as clear as they were 44 years ago. Knew exactly what I was thinking. I'm tired. I know the game is almost over. I'm now going to whack this ball with my left foot with every ounce of strength I've got left. And I'm thinking all this, if he goes beyond the bar, beyond the sand at Wembley, into the crowd. By the time the ball boy gets it to the German keeper, Tilkowski, by the time he kicks it down the park, surely to God the game has got to be over. But as you all know, I mishit it and it flew in. I've told this story and people don't... thank you. And as the ball entered the net, the referee blew for time, the game was over. I didn't know whether the goal had counted, in fact, until I got my suit back on in the dressing room, from up the tunnel, checked the scoreboard, that's perfectly true, saw it as 4-2 and realised the goal had counted. I can't really recall exactly what stage after that, many weeks, months later, that how significant the third goal had been in truth. And people started talking about it being done. It's a record that we know is hard to beat. It's a record that I'm very proud of. It's a record I got half a chance of taking to my grave. There's not so many goals being scored in finals, and we've got to get to a final. Now, a lot of people say to me, and have said to me over the years, not only myself but the team, you don't want England to win because you've won it once and it'll take it all away from you, and you don't want anybody to score three. And I just use the word nonsense because it's just, there's a lot of ladies in the audience, I just use the word nonsense. I'm a fan of the country, I'm a fan of the team, and I desperately hope we can win the World Cup. Nothing will please me and everybody else if we can be that successful. And I do hope we win the next World Cup 4-0, and Rooney and Crouch get 2 each. But if we have to win the World Cup and somebody score 3, fantastic, and we've had a good run, and it's overdue, and it'll be great. And I know more than anybody else, as does the team, when we still meet people today, as I talked about earlier, that remember the day, how important it is and significant, and what a lift we need really as a country in these difficult recessionary times. To be a great fillip to the country if we can have a great and magnificent summer. We're going to do a Q&A for a while, but I will leave you momentarily with a phrase or saying that's now really part of our language, from a famous commentary of a fairly big game of football a long time ago. You think it's all over? It is now. Thank you very much.
Ladies
Thank you.
and gentlemen, put your hands
Thanks a
together.
lot. Thank you.
Okay,
Thanks a lot.
now.
Thank you.
That's
Thank
right.
you.
Right, ladies and gents, we're going to go into a quick Q&A, so if you've got a burning question that you've always been wanting to ask Sir Geoff, Steve from Players Inc. is going to go and bring the microphone out in the crowd, so put your hands up, please, and we'll just get them as quick as possible. Cheers.
Stick your hand up and you'll get a mic and you can ask the question.
Anybody got a question? Anybody?
Can't see any.
All right, you've got to have one, John Paul. Go on, you must have a question. You got one?
Chap's got his hand up over here.
This one.
Who wants to ask a question?
No. Do you ever think there will be another player that can score more goals than you did in a World Cup final? Ever?
Well, you mean hat-trick itself? Well, unlikely.
Yeah.
Unlikely, because I think there's not quite so many goals being scored. Another record that's very difficult is actually the number of goals in the finals themselves. And a Frenchman called Just Fontaine in '58, I think, scored 13 goals in the final. So that's probably a more difficult record to beat. So it's a tough one to beat because we know it's 44 years, and so it's hard. It's proven very difficult. And of course we've got to get to a final before you do it, and that's also proved difficult to start with.
Another question here, Geoff.
Do you honestly think that we've got any sort of chance of winning this World Cup with the likes of Rooney having knee problems and Wayne Bridge and all the problems that they've got with women and stuff like that? Do you think it's possible that we could do anything with it?
Well, I think the women's side of it is gone and is done and dusted. That's finished. There's no good harping on it. That happened, and you move on from that. Wayne Rooney is a top-class player. He's got a slight knee problem, but I don't think it's anything going to keep him out of the rest of the season or for England. But I think what you have highlighted, we need to keep our best players on the pitch. We don't have the depth of a squad maybe Spain have, and you need a squad wins a World Cup, not a team. I'm part of a squad of players at 22, and a number of players will come on. Although we didn't have subs in our day, people came on and played other roles when they were picked to start the game. And so they play significant roles in the 7 games, not just, we remember the team, but it's a squad of players. Because 6 or 7 games, there's going to be an injury, there's going to be a suspension, or a yellow card possibly, or there may be 1 yellow and somebody not playing because you don't want to get a red and miss games. So that's quite important. And I think we're just a tiny bit, I'm not saying nothing new, we're a tiny bit weak in 1 or 2 key positions. And if you lose a Wayne Rooney who can win the World Cup on his own, I think the way he's playing, you're then, over 7 games, going to be a bit of a problem. But I'm very positive. I think I talked about it earlier, they're managed well, the players are responding. And Jack, what he said, it's the last chance. He feels that we have a chance, and I think we do. But I think we should get at least the semis, and then you're in the lap of the gods with injuries and a fair wind, we got a chance.
So, Geoff, we've got more of a chance in Scotland. Moving on to the next question.
Sir Geoff.
Good evening.
Important question. How many drinks did you pay for in 1967?
Was that when the Scots beat us? That's the most question asked I get by the Scots. Isn't it? Did I play in 1967 when the Scots beat us at Wembley 3-2, just after the World Cup, and declared themselves world champions and took the crossbar back home to Scotland? But it's sad really. I mean, the Scots today are not quite as strong, but in our day, the Scots had a fantastic team. That team with Dennis Law, magnificent. Dave Mackay was an absolutely magnificent player for Spurs, unbelievable player for the Spurs, great side. And every great English team had 1 or 2 Scots in it. And sadly, we don't see quite the quality of Scots coming down south. As probably Dalglish in '77 was the last really great Scot that's come down south and was magnificent at Liverpool for a long time. Did I pay? Yeah, I don't pay for drinks, mate. I've been offered a pint tonight, but I said I'm not going to drink till I've said a few words.
Another question here.
Where are you? Okay, fine. Good evening.
All right.
Yes, fine.
I'd just like to know who the hardest centre-half was you've ever played against.
Well, it was always... I think that we grew up at a time when you could tackle from behind, which has been outlawed now. So most centre-halves and defenders were big big guys who didn't need to be too mobile to have to turn because they could just come through you. So that rule changed, and so the big 9'7" centre-half with a bolt through his neck probably is no more. And most teams had one. And you had a couple up here. And also, when you played Newcastle with the stripes, which when they wear tight shirts, the stripes were bulging everywhere. They looked twice the bloody size. People like McNamee and Bobby Moncur, to mention two. I still bear the scars. But I think that the great thing is about that time, it was more physical, but it wasn't quite the... He had a whack at you and you had to go back and there was no aggravation. Well, you know, there was no feigning of injury or rolling around. And I speak to a lot of centre-halves now. I saw Jack recently and another guy called Vic Mobley, who was a giant from Sheffield Wednesday in that era, a huge man. Saw him in New Zealand a couple of years ago. And I get irritated when I see front players dive. You can imagine how they feel when the centre-half of our era sees the diving and feigning of injury, which they get so irritated by it, they want to throttle, they want to go on the pitch and whack them. The centre-halves really get the needle with that. And Norman Hunter and Ronnie Harris, who I see now and again, they really get really annoyed when they see the foreigners rolling over the place, which is something that they've introduced, you know, one of the sad things that they've introduced from Europe.
Another question here.
But there's always one or two in, I can go through a few. Yes.
We claim to have the best league probably on the planet. But what
the best what on the planet?
Best league, football league on the planet.
Yes.
What sort of prevents us from won anything for the last 44 years? Like anything, European Championships, World Cups. What do you think?
Well, I think the big concern today is the Premier League is a fantastic league, but with the changes that there's now 70% of foreign players. So you've got a very limited number of players are A, playing for the big clubs, B, playing in European competitions. There's a breeding ground for going on to international football, and so there are not so many players. You could argue it's easy to get in an England team today when every player in the league in our time was English, or apart from the great Scots coming down. So I think it has an impact. It has an impact on the national side because of the strength and the great preponderance of foreign players playing in the league. So it has an impact. And I think our squad is not, it's not as strong as it should be. There's not as much depth probably as compared with Spain, and I mentioned that earlier. So no, that's a real problem.
Another question here, Sir Geoff.
Where are you? You're missing. Where are you? Oh, hello. Good evening.
Hi, Sir Geoff.
Good evening.
Just want to know, out of the current England squad, would there be anyone that you'd want there in the 1966 team?
Darren Bent, Sunderland. Very good. It must be a Sunderland fan. Somebody up on the top table said somebody's got to clean the boots. I didn't say that's a top table comment. I think you've got to analyse our side. We had a great side. We don't win a World Cup if you've got an ordinary team. And I think what we had, to start with, but talking about our team, we had probably the best backbone of any England team up until today. If you look at the backbone of the side, we had Gordon Banks in goal, who was the best keeper we've had, ever. We had Bobby Moore at the back, who arguably the best defender of his type that can play from the back, almost like a sweeper, which you need. All great World Cup sides of a guy at the back that can play. Passarella at Argentina, Beckenbauer from Germany. It adds, but Moore was in that class, in that category. He was just an unbelievably best player I played with, alongside Pelé, who was the best player I played against. You had Bobby Charlton. Just think about it, Bobby Charlton in midfield. We talk about Lampard today, who was a fantastic player, can play in any era. We talk about Steven Gerrard, an absolutely brilliant player, could play in any era. But you've got to ask yourself, both unbelievably brilliant players. Bobby Charlton, our midfield player, played 100 times for England, just over 100 games, and scored nearly 50 goals. 1 goal every 2 games from a midfield player. Great fitness, fantastic with both feet. So would you leave Bobby Charlton out for either of those two? Arguably not. And up front, I've talked about Jimmy. Although Jimmy didn't play in the final, he was one of our genuine world-class players, and I've talked about his record. Who would get in the side? Over the years, the only player, up until the current side, I'll touch on that, the only player I thought of all the England sides we've seen could get in the team was Brian Robson from Man United, in that central midfield role, tough, aggressive, score goals from midfield, a brilliant leader. He was one you've got to consider might sneak in the team. Hopefully he's not instead of me. It was a good side in that respect. Of the current side, people like Gerrard and Lampard today and Wayne Rooney are fantastic players. And Wayne particularly, I think, and Stephen can play in any era. I think there are players playing today in different rules and not quite so physical, probably may have struggled in our era, but people like Wayne can play today because he's so fit and so aggressive and so tough and takes the knocks and gets up and so enthusiastic. Is a player you know would survive in the really tough and physical times of our time. Would they get in the side? I don't know. I said I hope Wayne Rooney was a brilliant player. I'd like to have played with Wayne. I think Wayne's best for me when he's got a player up front with him, and I don't think we have anybody of the calibre of say a traditional centre forward like say Alan Shearer, who I think Wayne playing off him or myself to a degree, he would get even better out of him.
Moving on to the next question.
Okay, sorry, am I going on too long? Beg your pardon. What time have we got to get home? Where am I? Oh, a lady's question. Good evening. Hello there.
Good evening, Sir Geoff.
Hi.
You have been my hero since 1966.
Thank you, sweetheart.
I still have World Cup Willie.
Pardon?
The scrapbook.
Oh, the scrapbook. No.
I was 6. I still got it, and I still love you.
Oh,
I tell the kids of today, you scored 3 goals in 1966 World Cup, and they don't know who I'm talking about, but I still reinstill it in everybody.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
My question to you.
Oh, there's a question coming. All right.
Yes, Sir Geoff. Everybody give him a round of applause. He deserves it. Woo! Sir Geoff, if you could change anything in football today, bear in mind it's all money orientated, but there's still a lot of talent out there who aren't being recognised. What would you do to change football today? Let me ask you that one.
Well, I think in terms of the current game, I've touched on it earlier, but I'll answer that by saying I think the feigning of injury is probably the most irritating aspect of the game, not only in this country but in World Cups where players are feigning injury to gain an advantage, to stop the game. I've seen all the World Cup in Germany, and the amount of times I saw teams where a player's gone forward, gets injured, he's okay really, but he looks back and sees there's a problem in his position where he's just come from, and they roll over again to try and gain. And I think we're seeing it really, really badly in this country, and I think it's something we don't like in this country. Although over the years I've played 40 or 50 odd years in the game, foreign coaches and players see that as part and parcel of the game, more so than we do in this country. We regard that quite clearly in this country as cheating, and I think they've got to get to grips with that feigning of injury and maybe do something, be more aggressive with the punishment, or maybe like rugby, some ideas where when they get injured in rugby, bring the trainer on, just carry on playing, so the game carries on, and don't let the cheats get away with stopping a game when they're genuinely not wrong. That's that at the top end. At the bottom end, I just think we need. I talked about foreign players. We need to be producing more young kids at grassroots level. The system isn't working. We're not producing enough of Wayne Rooney's and Steven Gerrard's who walk into their club side, walk into the England side. We're not producing enough as we did in our day. And in our day, we played football in the streets, in the playgrounds, on the parks, and that system, without coaches, without parents screaming on the touchline like they do today, that system produced some of the greats of any era. And we've got to get back in terms of development of young people, more like that than we see clubs signing young kids at 7 years of age. That certainly is not right, and it certainly isn't working. So at the grassroots level, we need to focus on more kids playing and bringing them up the right way.
Okay, we're moving on to the last couple of questions.
Right. Wave to me. I can't see. It's dark out there.
Hi, Sir Geoff.
Good evening.
I've always wondered how Jimmy Greaves felt not playing in the final, and also, did he ever tell you?
A good question. It's been asked a lot. Jimmy was I guess, absolutely gutted not to play in the final. I mean, he was one of the players that were likened to Wayne Rooney. You can imagine Wayne Rooney, how he would feel. Well, Wayne Rooney hates it when you take him off, you know, with 5 minutes there, give him a rest, and he scored 2. He just so wants to be on the park, and he's a player you expect to play. He's a stone-cold certainty to play, as Jimmy was, right throughout the tournament. And Jimmy got injured, and things moved on, and he didn't get his place back. So he was choked. People have built it up to be more disappointed than he was. He puts it into context when he's asked about that. His big disappointment was a family thing when his young kid died at a young age. And when people say, you know, has that ruined your life? And he puts it in context by saying losing a member of your family is a bit more tragic than not being picked for a game of football, as hard as it is. In terms of telling me, Jimmy and I get on. He's a great lad. I've known him for a long time. And funny enough, he was an idol of mine, Jimmy. When I was a struggling midfield player for West Ham, Jimmy was at the peak of his career, leaving Chelsea for Milan, and he lived in our area. He trained at West Ham for a month before he went to Milan. So I got to see Jimmy at close-up, as I say, as a struggling player, saw what a genius he was at scoring goals in five-a-sides and practice matches. As you say, he lived near us, and we got on great. And we never really talked about it, to be honest. But you know, he was naturally hugely disappointed not to play.
So Geoff, we've got the last 2 questions. Two people standing together. They're standing together here, so they're going to take turns, take the questions, and then give the answer.
Can I just, before you just ask the last couple, just say, just thanks very much tonight for the charity. Oh, you've been very generous in what you've done. You've been generous in donating, you know, £5 for the signature. Great to here to be helped, Danny. It's the work that you people. And I'm lucky, as I said earlier, I'm president of the Sparks charity of the year, the sportsman's charity. And I get the opportunity, I come to dinners like this where I see the money raised and it all go into a funnel. And I'm very fortunate to go to a hospital this year to see specifically where the money goes and how it's used to change people's lives in the Sparks charity. And you can be assured the money, every penny you've raised today and given very, very kindly, and I thank you for that, goes to an unbelievably fantastic charity which is for children, and nothing for me can be better than that. So thanks very much, you out there, for your very generous support to me individually by donating money for my signature, and I'm just delighted to be here with Danny, who I've known for a long, long time. Yes, here we go, 2 more.
Hi, Sir Geoff.
Good evening.
I was just wondering what your personal opinion is on FIFA awarding South Africa the World Cup due to the security problems.
It's a good question. Well, I think two things on that. One, I think FIFA's responsibility to take football, it's a global game, and the responsibility to a great degree is to take football to parts of the world that hasn't had a World Cup. But you mentioned the obvious query is the security. And I do hope that the place is secure enough that football fans going over there don't have any problems, you know, real serious problems, not coming back. That would not justify taking a World Cup to a country which, as far as the press is concerned, seems to be a really violent country, and I'm sure there'll be lots of security there. But it would be a real disaster if we do see a number of high-profile deaths, I guess is the only way you could pronounce it. But their view is to take it globally, but I do hope the security is, and there's no real disasters. On a personal basis, Big Jack's quite funny on this. He said, I played 750 games for Leeds. He said, and everybody wants to talk to him about the World Cup final. And you tend to get a bit like that, but I always remind people that forgetting an England career, I had a very enjoyable and fulfilling career at a club. And my best memory individually was, and some Newcastle fans will be pleased with this, delighted with it when I say this, we played Sunderland at West Ham.
Go on, Geoff.
And we won 8-0.
What was that score?
And 8-0.
Anybody not hear that?
And I got a hat-trick in both halves, which is the last time anybody scored 6 goals in a game. So I knew he'd keep one after the North East happy. That's probably on a personal basis. To score a hat-trick in both halves is 6 in a game is not bad. Sorry again, Sunderland boys.
Ladies and gentlemen, Sir Geoff
Thank you.
Hurst.
Thanks very much. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Great to be here. Thank you.